We're up to 47a, about 12 lines up from the bottom, I believe. I'm actually going to go back a little bit before that, just to get into the context of it, because it's right in the middle of something. So we're talking about this idea. Yeah, let's just go back to the point. Omer Ula, Omer Rabbi Yochanan, 6 lines, the sixth wide line. Just to back a little, because this is really where the idea starts, and just you have to go over this anyway. Might as well read it inside. So 6 lines from where it gets wide. Omer Ula, Omer Rabbi Yochanan. Everyone find the spot? Do you see it there in the art scroll? Omer Ula, Omer Rabbi Yochanan, just a little bit before where you were yesterday. But
near the bottom?
Near the bottom. I mean, yeah, it's maybe sometimes the bottom's wide, so it might be half the page. But so yesterday you were 12 lines up. This is about 5 lines before that. This is the statement that we're going to be evaluating. It says Omer Ula, Omer Rabbi Yochanan. Ula said the name of Yochanan. Achol chelav. He ate chelav, which is one of the forbidden fats. And it's talking about if you did it by accident. If you eat the forbidden fat by accident, you're obligated to bring a sacrifice to replace it. Hivrish card, he set aside his sacrifice, a chatas. The Hamer daito, and he became not religious anymore. He stopped believing everything. He stopped keeping any amount of mitzvahs. And the rule is someone who does not believe in the mitzvahs is not allowed to bring a sacrifice. The chazerbo, and he went back on it. He went back to becoming religious again. Since at some point this sacrifice was unacceptable because he was not a believer. This sacrifice he's been once it was pushed aside, it's permanently pushed aside. He can never bring this sacrifice. The Marnami was also said by someone else. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Achol chelev, if he ate fat, the hivrish carbon, he set aside a sacrifice, and he went crazy. A crazy person also is not capable of bringing a carbon. And then he went back to being insane. Since it was pushed aside, it's been pushed aside. That sacrifice is no longer acceptable. He has to bring a different sacrifice in its place. But we need both these statements, even though it's the same idea, but you could not drive one to the other. We heard the first one. That's the reason why that one has to be replaced. He proactively pushed himself aside, made himself not allowed to bring a sacrifice. But this, when he went crazy, that came automatically. That did it by itself. You might think that's not strong enough to make a permanent disqualification of the sacrifice. Just like being asleep, everyone's not mentally capacitated when they're asleep. So you might think that being crazy is no worse than being asleep. It's just a temporary lack of ability, but you're still deep down inside of yourself. But if someone becomes not religious, that's an actual change. Or maybe the opposite. But if you thought here only about being crazy, you don't have control of yourself. You can't change. If someone's crazy, they're out of it. They're not. It's impossible for them to bring a sacrifice in it right now. But there in the first case, when someone would stop giving mitzvahs, the yad his ability to go back at any moment. There's no point in time when he's not allowed to bring a carbon because he can always say, you know what, I believe again. I'm going to bring the sacrifice. So he's never really not capable of bringing it. There's no time they actually can't bring a sacrifice because he control it. Aim alone, you might think no, that it's not disqualified. Therefore, we need both these statements. I think that's just a review from yesterday. Now this is going further. Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, Af anan nami tanina. We also taught in the Mishnah. This is later on in Sanhedrin, last parak. Talking about an Ir Hanidachas. An Ir Hanidachas is a city that the majority of the city, we came up in the first parak also, but a city, the majority of its inhabitants did avodah zarah, and the rule is we kill anyone in it who did avodah zarah, and everything in it, regardless of who owns it, is destroyed, with a few exceptions, some of which we'll discuss now. It says, Hayaba kachim, if there was some kind of sacrificial items in it, the items of property of the temple. So kachim is back, anything that is obligated to be brought to the temple, any kind of sacrifice. Yamusa, they should die. We can't bring them. Kaji bedekabayis, anything that's just a monetary obligation temple. The item itself is not going to be used by a temple, but it's a monetary obligation. You should redeem it, but you can't use the actual item, but it doesn't need to get you don't have to destroy it. You can trade it for money, but you can't actually use that item in the service of the temple. But binanba, and we discussed it. Maya Musa, why do the sacrifices have to be destroyed? Kavan to Iktel, since he was killed, Havilu Kapara. Then it should be an atonement, Veliska Levoa, and then he should be able to bring the sacrifice. Because this is really what we said. This is. I should have went back even further. This is the overall discussion. That was the local discussion. Now there's a more fundamental discussion before that. I probably should have gone back a few lines earlier to start today. But the rule is, the main discussion we're talking about is, the question is death and atonement. So where do you see that? The question is, right? The question we're discussing is death and atonement. Talking about the two sites of graveyards. We after someone's executed, we bury them with other people like them. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so why don't we say death and atonement? And should be able to bring the sacrifices. Lav mishum dimini, isn't it because we say hovad inche yidku? And so this is a fundamental. You're right. Yeah, this is a fundamental. This is the main thing. So say the moment he's not religious, he wasn't able to bring it. Even though now that he's been executed, he's been atoned for. He could bring it, but for a short time, he's not able to bring it. Amalei Abaye says, hold on a second. Mi savras. Do you think meis misoch risho havle kapara, that when he dies while he's a rasha, when he's wicked without doing tshuva, that's considered atonement? No, meis misoch risho lo havle kapara. When he dies when he's wicked, that's not considered atonement. How do we know that? Tani Rav Shemaiah says, Yachol, you might think, you might think even when his father is separated from the ways of the community, that he should contaminate himself. The rule is a Kohen is not allowed to contaminate himself for people, but his close relatives he can. You might think that even if his father stops keeping mitzvahs, he could contaminate himself. The verse says, Ba'amav, in his nation, meaning contaminate for his relatives when they're among the nation, but Osemaisa when they're doing the action of the nation, when they're acting like a member of the Jewish people, but his father's not acting like the Jewish people, he cannot contaminate for him. You see that the death is not an atonement if the death comes when a person is wicked. If someone did tshuva and died, then yeah, that's an atonement. Someone did not do tshuva before they died, that's not an atonement. Kaven di orche kamayis, so I skipped a line. Rava says back to Abaye. Hold on a second. Are you comparing someone who got killed, who died, someone who died by while he was wicked, someone who was executed? Someone who was killed while he was wicked, or someone who died naturally because of his wickedness? When he just happened to die while he's wicked, since he died in a natural way, then it's not an atonement. However, but if he's killed from his wickedness, this is not a natural way of dying, then that counts as an atonement. So you're trying to compare the case of the person getting executed and saying, right, we said originally, if someone executed, that's an atonement, that should be an atonement. But then he said, we talk about someone who is wicked and then just passed away, saying that's not an atonement. It's not a contradiction. The father, he's not allowed to contaminate for his father because the father died naturally. There's no atonement here. But with the person in the city of refuge was executed, that is an atonement. And therefore, the only reason we can't bring the sacrifice is because for a short time you couldn't bring the sacrifice, and now it's permanently disqualified. It says, Teda, I'll prove it to you. The verse says, Mizmor l'Asaf, a song of Asaf, Elokim Hashem, Baal Goyim Menachal Asecha. The nations have entered your inheritance. Timu Asecha Kashecha, they have contaminated your holy sanctuary. Nasnu es niflas avadecha, Ma'achal Ofa Shemayim. They have put the carcasses of your servants for food for the birds of the heavens. Basar Chesidecha, the meat of your righteous, your devout ones. The Chayso Eretz for the wild animals of the land. It says, hold on, it's repetitive. My avadecha, my chazidecha. What's the difference between the people, your servants, and your righteous ones, your devout ones? Lav, isn't it chasidecha that the devout ones are chasidecha mamash, people who are actually devout, people who get mitzvahs. Avadecha, your servants, hanat mechayev dina, people who are deserving of a punishment. Mikar in the first place, deserving a punishment ahead of time. Came to Ikton, since they got murdered. They called your servants. So you see that someone who died was killed while they're wicked gets an atonement. Because otherwise, what's repetitive? People who keep mitzvahs, for sure. Even if people don't get mitzvahs, but when they die al Kiddush Hashem, when they're murdered for the sake of being Jewish, for sure they get an atonement. So say same thing when they're executed as part of Beis Din, it should be an atonement. So hold on a second, there's a difference. Because are you comparing Harugim Malchus, people killed by the government, meaning people who were executed for keeping mitzvahs for being Jewish, Harugi Beis Din, people who are killed executed by Beis Din, Harugim Malchus, people who are killed by the king for being Jewish, Kevin Shaloba Din, at least since it's not what they deserve that they were killed, Havalu Kapar, that's an atonement. Harugim Beis Din, people who are killed by Beis Din, Kevin Bedin Miktali, since with justice they are killed, meaning they deserve it. Lo Havilu Kapar, then it's not considered an atonement for them. Teda, prove to you that being executed is not an atonement. The Sonic, it says on our Mishnah. I think this is later in the chapter. But when someone's executed by Beis Din, they would not be buried in their ancestral burial plot. The and if it entered your mind, came to Iktal, since they're killed, Havi Lukapar, they got an atonement. Likfuru, they should be buried in their family plot. Once they executed, they're atoned. They don't need to do anything more. Asks, it's actually so this is not this is right. It's our mission right here. This is our mission here, right? Our mission here says we don't bury them in their burial plot. So you see, there's not death is not an atonement. One says no, misik for no. We need death and burial. They're not. They can't be buried in their family plot because part of the atonement of execution is the burial. Mostly Rav Ada Barava challenged it. So now we're saying that really being executed by Beis Din is an atonement, and the only reason they can't bring the sacrifice in the city of in the city that's just killed, the Nachas, is because for a short time it wasn't given the mitzvah. So we're back to that original statement right now. Mostly Rav Ada Barava. Rav Ada Barava asks, it says later in the Mishnah, Lohaim is Abla, and they wouldn't mourn. But they would do a ninas. They would. So the way of mourning works is the first day. On Torah level, just the first day. Rabbinically, it's until the burial. Then someone's called an onain, and there are many different laws, including that you don't do any positive mitzvahs, and you just totally focus on the dead person entirely, as opposed to shiva, which is a little bit different. You keep the mitzvahs for the most part. So there's no availus, there's no mourning, but this onanin part of mourning that they have. Because the ninas part is really in the heart. And if it entered your mind, cave into ikvar havi lukapara, that if once they're buried, there's atonement. They should mourn for them, because mourning starts at the burial. It says no, be'ina nami equal basar. You need also the rotting of the flesh, meaning the execution plus burial is not enough. You need to execute plus burial plus the rotting of the flesh. Once the flesh is rotted, then they're really atoned for. Dikanami, you can make a diak from that. You can deduce that that's the case. Dikani, it says later in the Mishnah, it's akal abasa, when the flesh is rotted away. Malaktin is atamos, you gather in the bones, and you bury them in their place, meaning they get buried in their family plot. Shemamina, from this we see that there is an atonement here. At some point, the death sentence is over. Death sentence plus burial plus decomposing of the flesh, that finally is atonement. Then after that, they can be buried in the family plot. Rashi says, hold on, no, you don't have to go that far. Velus mourning, when does the mourning start? Mistimas a golel, from the moment that the grave, the casket is covered. Or some in other cases, back then it used to be they're buried in a cave. As soon as you cover the mouth of the cave, they're now buried. That's when the mourning starts. When is the atonement? When they've experienced a little bit of the pain of being buried. which happens a moment later. Hilkach, therefore, Hoel ve'idchu, since at the moment that the Veilus of the morning was supposed to start, it was pushed aside, it couldn't take it back at that moment, Yidchu was pushed aside, meaning the morning starts a second of burial. The atonement happens when they experience the pain of being buried. So they're buried for at least one moment before they've experienced that moment of pain. So in that moment, that's when the morning was supposed to start. The morning didn't start then because they didn't have the atonement yet. It doesn't start a moment later. Now that they've had their atonement, it could theoretically start, but it doesn't start because it's already been too late. It missed its chance. Gemara says, if so, lamali equal. Why do we have to wait till the flesh is dissolved? Equal buster. Why do we wait till the flesh is dissolved? You should bury them. You should bury them in the burial plot of Beis Din, and then immediately bring them back and bury them in their family plot. Your answer is mishum delo afshar. It's not possible. Once they've started to rot, even a little bit, it's no longer you no longer can transport them until they've rotted entirely. When they die, they're still intact, and once they start to rot even a little bit, it's no longer a situation where you could just move them around. So it's not possible, and therefore you just leave them there until they're all the way rot, and then you can move them. We have some stories. Kivrei de Rav from the grave of Rav. So anyway, that's the end of our discussion. So we leave it off that it sounds like being executed is an atonement, and therefore, at least it eventually leads to atonement. And therefore, it is a proof that if someone stops keeping mitzvahs and then goes back to keeping mitzvahs, then the sacrifice, since it was not acceptable when he didn't keep mitzvahs, it's permanently not acceptable even when he goes back to keeping mitzvahs. Because otherwise, when someone's executed in the city that's destroyed, then we would be allowed to offer the sacrifices, and we're not allowed. So we leave it off that it is considered a good proof that once it's pushed aside, it's permanently pushed aside. Everything okay? Okay. Should I keep going? Okay, fine. Kivrei de Rav. Now we have the grave of Rav. Have a shakli mine afra. They would take from it dirt, nishte bas yame, for a fresh fever. A fever on the first day. They felt they had a medicinal property, and they used to treat people with it. I'm not sure exactly what they did. I think they drank it somehow. What does Rashi say? No, they just said that they would heat them with it. Doesn't say what they did with it.
General rules forbidden to derive benefit.
Right. So as pointed out that you're not allowed to get benefit from anything belonging to a dead person, for the dead person himself. You can't benefit from the dead person or the grave. So Asu, they came, Amr Leila Shmuel, they told Shmuel, here's what they're doing. Amr, we said to them, Yos Avdin, what they're doing is totally fine. Karka Olamhu, it just land of the world. Karka Olam Einu Naseres, and land of the world is not forbidden. I mean, anything that's part of the ground is not forbidden. So you can take the dirt from the grave; it's not a problem. The pasuk says, "V'yashlik es afara," and they threw its dirt al kever b'nei ha'am, on the graves of the land of the people, of the sons of the people. I mean.
He burned the ceremony through the ash upon the graves and the people.
Right. What's the case of this? What's the case it's talking about? Does it say?
He burned the Asherah and threw it.
The Asherah tree. So burn the Asherah through on the graves. So Makish Kever b'nei Am lavodos kachavim. We're comparing the grave of a person in the nation to idol. Mavros kavim. What do we say about an idol item? B'mechumer lo mitzvah. Anything that's attached to the ground is not forbidden. See, the pasuk says, "Asher tem yorshim osam." It said, "In the lands that you're inheriting them, as Elohim alaharm, they're gods on the mountains." What do we get from the haram on the high mountains? Alaharm Elohim, the gods are on the mountains, v'lo harm Elohim, but not the mountains as their gods. If they worship mountains, the mountains are not forbidden. The gods that are on the mountains are forbidden, but not the mountains themselves, even if they're worshipped. Hachanam here also, b'mechuber lo mitzvah, so too the dirt that's attached to the ground, that is not forbidden. It's part of the ground, it's not forbidden. Amazing challenge to that. It's chotziv kever laviv, someone who digs out a grave for his father. He went v'kaver makam he buried him somewhere else. He never used it. He said, "Lo yikiver ba'olamis," cannot be buried in that grave he dug for his father ever. So Hakamaiski, and this is what we're talking about there. The kever binyan, an above ground, what's the word? Oscillium? Mausoleum, right? Mausoleum. Right, ossuary is something else, right? A mausoleum. I'm trying to find it. A mausoleum. So you built the mausoleum. That's a building that's not attached to the ground. That's what's forbidden. But if we would have dug a grave for the father, then he could get buried in that. Tashma, I'll bring another proof. Come listen. Kever Chana, someone found a new grave. Mutter Bana, you're allowed to benefit from it. However, Hitel Bonevel put a miscarried baby in it. Also, now that grave is forbidden to have benefit from it. So you see, you're forbidden to have benefit from a grave. So Hakanami, this is also here, but Kever Bin, you're talking about a built up mausoleum. A grave that's built up, and that's why it's forbidden. Tashma, I'll bring another proof. Nimsa to Omer, we find out halachically, Shlosh Gavaras, and there are three kinds of discovered graves. If someone discovers a grave in their field, there are three scenarios for that. Number one, Kever Nimsa, a grave that was found, it was brand new, no one had ever heard of it before. Kever Yudua, it was a grave that was known about previously. Kever Mazik is a rabbim, and a grave that is damaging the public, it's impeding the public flow of traffic. That's Kever Nimsa, a grave that was found. So you can move the person, you can move the body and put it somewhere else. You have no obligation to leave it there in your field. Pino, when you do move it, Makomo Torah, then it's the land it leaves behind is pure. We don't assume there's any contamination here. Once we know, you can have benefit from the land. Kever, you do a known grave, this grave has been there a while, we know it's there, so we assume that it has a right to be there. Therefore, us live no, so you're not allowed to move it. Pino, if you did move it, Kamotame, the place stays contaminated since you weren't allowed to move it. Rabbinically, we keep the place as contaminated. Thus, we're not allowed to benefit from that spot. Kever Mazik is a Ravim, and a grave that damages the public. Mutter leave no, so you're allowed to move it. Pino, if you did move it, Makomotar, the place needs to be tahor, it's not contaminated. However, also we're not cannot have benefit from the spot since it was at the time it was buried properly, even though now it's in the way. But since at the time it's buried properly, you can't have benefit from that spot. So Hachanami, but you see from here that a grave is forbidden. Here I say, Hachanami here also, but Kever Bin, you're talking about a built grave, but just a grave that someone's buried in the ground, you would not say the land is permanently forbidden. No. And the Gemara asks, Kever and Imsa, Mutter Lifnosa, but a grave that was found, you're allowed to clear it away. Dilma Mace Mitzvahu. Maybe it was someone who died without anyone to bury them, and they were buried on the spot they were found. Mitzvah kind of makomo, and a dead person acquires the place where he is. Someone randomly dies without any family, without at least knowing who his family is. You don't take responsibility to bury him. The rule is wherever he dies, he gets buried there. He automatically acquires that plot. That is one. If you remember back from Bava Kama was about a year ago. I think it was toward the end of Bava Kama. It's a little less than a year ago, but close to a year. Actually, very close to a year. Then the rule is that when Yeshua gave the land of Israel to the Jewish people, there were 10 conditions imposed on them, and one of them was someone dies in Israel, you bury him on the spot. Someone without family, no one take responsibility, dies, bury them on the spot. So this person, the grave is found in his field, maybe it was a mate's mitzvah, someone who died without anyone to bury them, that's why he got buried on the spot. Which says no, shani mate's mitzvah. It's different when a person dies without anyone's responsibility. The kala isla, that there's a voice that's famous, we would have heard about it. We would have heard about it, and therefore we assume that when someone finds a grave in their field, we assume they're buried there without permission, not with permission. And therefore that's why you're allowed to move it. So far, so good?
The permission, how was the permission established?
Meaning the rule is one of the conditions when he came to Israel that if someone dies anywhere without any family, or we don't know who it is, then they acquire the land where they died as a burial plot. Now we have a new discussion. Itmar. Ha'ori beged l'meis. If someone weaves a garment to it for a dead person. Abaye says, it's forbidden to have any benefit from it other than to use it for the dead person. Rava Amar Mutter. Rava says, no, it's not forbidden, it's permitted to have use of it. You can change your mind and not give it to the dead person. So Abaye Amar Aser, Abaye says it's forbidden. Hasman and Milsi, preparation is the thing. When you set aside, designate something for a certain use, it's considered to have had that use already, and it's forbidden to the same degree that object would be if you used it for that already. Rava Amar Rava says no, it's permitted. As one will see that preparing something does not matter, and it does not have any status changes because he planned to use it for something. My time of Abai, what's the reasoning of Abai? Why does Abai say when you plan to use something, that's enough to make it forbidden? Gamar Sham Egle Rufa. You learn the word there from the word there that's written by Egle Rufa, by the calf. It was that someone is killed, murdered, and we don't know who killed them. Then we measure and find the closest city, and the people of the closest city bring a calf down to the land called Asan, very hard, not fit for planting, and they kill the calf, chop the back of its neck, and they bury it there, and it's forbidden to have any benefit from that spot. So ma egla rufa, what do we know about egla rufa? Bahasmana mitzvah, the moment you designate this is the egla rufa, even though the neck has not been chopped yet, it's still forbidden. Hainami, so too here, this case, where it says it should be buried, it should be, what's the original sham? The grave of Miriam, where it says they buried Miriam there. It says, it says the place where the Goyim passed. So we learn out there from the Eglufa, just like the grave of Miriam. So we say the grave of Miriam is like the calf, just like the calf is forbidden the moment it's designated, so too grave is forbidden like the moment it's designated. So Avhacha, so to here by the grave, Nami Bazmana Lo Mitzvah. When he I'm sorry, I skipped.
Just as an object.
Right. So just like an object like the Egla Rufa becomes forbidden the moment you designate it, so too this grave is forbidden the moment you designated it. Rava going, no, Sham Avodas Kahavim. You learn there from idolatry. It's a different verse. It says the place where the idols worshipped their gods. Ma'avodas Kahavim. What do we say about idolatry? Bezman lo mitzvah is not forbidden. Someone makes an idol, has never worshipped it, it's not forbidden. It's only for men they worship it. Avhacha, so to hear by grave, not by grave, by the clothing for the dead person, also preparing it does not make it forbidden. The same thing by a grave. Now you ask, they both agree learning out from this word shame. How do we pick which shame, or so which sham, there? We're learning out from the word there. Why made us pick this there instead of that there? Rava, according to Rava, my time lo gam megla rufa. Why don't we learn out from the calf? He says misham things that are in service, we learn from other things that are in service. I mean, a garment is made to service a dead person. And we're talking over there about things, not the idolatry itself, but things that are prepared for the idolatry. Someone makes clothes, etc., for idol. So we should better to learn out the clothing of the idol to the clothing for the dead person that are both side things. To exclude the calf, the he gufa kedusha, because that itself is a holiness. It's not a side thing. That is the thing itself. It's holy because of itself, not because of something else. It's forbidden because of itself, not because of something else. So the clothing for idol is forbidden because of the idol. The clothing for the dead person is forbidden for the dead person. But the calf is forbidden because of itself.
There's no there.
Right. The Ba'ina is the opposite. In my time, I lo gomer mi avodas kavim. Why doesn't he allow for idolatry? We say midi de hetera, mimini hetera. So midi de I made up a word. Midi orch. We say something normal, something that's appropriate, something that's appropriate. I mean, the Egla Rufa is a mitzvah to do, and making clothing for the dead person is a mitzvah. That's why I want to learn from the other Gamrina. We want to learn from there. Afuk the exclude of avodas kachavim, idolatry, an item that's used for idolatry to serve an idol. That itself is a sin. Bringing the calf is a mitzvah. Dressing a dead person is a mitzvah. We'd rather learn out a mitzvah from mitzvah as opposed to the idolatry, which is forbidden, but that's a sin. We don't want to learn from there. Now, we're going to have some proofs. The simon, the sign for the proofs is a kappa. Kippah, nafshe, techativa, and nechise, and umna. Those are the various different proofs we'll see. We'll see them one at a time. Kippah is like kippah, some kind of hat. Nafshe is a soul. Techativa is dugout. Nechisa, I think, is talking about covering or burial. And umna is some kind of a craftsman. So we'll see. Well, hopefully we'll get at least a little bit Still a few minutes before Shachri, so we'll try to do a lot of this as much as we can. So Mesa, let's have a challenge here. Kippah, a hat of some form, Tamei Midras, which is now Tamei and the Midras. So Midras is if an item is designated for sitting on, and a woman who is in need is a classic case of Midras, but it could be a Zav also, but a woman who's in nida sits on it or stands on it, puts her weight on it, then it becomes Tamei Midrash, which is a fairly severe tumah. If it touches anything else, it can make that thing tumah as well, even if it's a vessel. Most forms of tumah cannot contaminate a vessel; it can only contaminate people or foods. But I should say they can. Most things that are forbidden cannot contaminate something else to make it contaminate a third thing. I mean, there's something called an avatum. An av can contaminate a rishon, but a rishon cannot contaminate anything else except for food and drink, as a general rule. But a midras is actually pretty severe that it can contaminate things to make them an avatum. So if you put a vessel on this hat, then the vessel will now become tamei, and that if something else touches that vessel, that thing will become tamei as well. So midras is pretty severe. So this hat has a capacity for midras. So not none of the capacity, but it's tamei is midras. Nasan Lasapar, he gave it to a bookbinder, the bookbinder, or is it a barber? I think a barber. No, it's a bookbinder. Someone uses it he gives it to use as a book cover. Tar min midras, it no longer is contaminated as midras. About tamei, and there's a debate here what to write. Is it either it's maga midras because it touched something that was midras. You have that version, then what it means is that even it's no longer suitable for the contamination of being midras, but since it's the same item, it's equivalent to have touched itself, and therefore it's still tamei, as if it 1 degree down, as if it touched the midras item. So it's no longer able to contaminate a vessel to make something else tamei. It can only contaminate food and drink and things like that, or person, to make them tamei, but not to pass that on to something else. What? She
gave and wrapped it around a Torah scroll.
Right. So you say that it loses its tumah status, but it still retains a lower level tumah status, either because it's touched it or tamei mace. It's level of having touched a dead person, which is again it's a lower level of status. Doesn't have the capacity for midras anymore. So you see, just designated, giving it over, handing it over, that's enough to change the status. So no emo say nasanu, you gave it v'karakto, you actually wrap a Torah in it, and then you need to do both. It says lamali nasnanu, why didn't you give it? Karakto, right? V'karakto, why didn't you give it and wrap it? Why need both? Rav Chisda, like Rav Chisda said, the Amar Rav Chisda said, "Hi Sudra, this handkerchief to Azmei L'Meitzah Beit Tefillin, you designated to be used as your tefillin bag, but Tsar Beit Tefillin, and you actually put the tefillin in one time. Asur L'Meitzah Beit Pshit, you can no longer wrap money in it. Azman, he designated V'lo Tsar Beit, but he didn't actually wrap the tefillin in it, or Tsar Beit, or wrap the tefillin in it. V'lo Azman, he's not designated, just he would use it one time. He said, you know what, I don't think let me wrap it in my handkerchief. Then Sharet L'Meitzah Beit Tefillin, afterwards you're allowed to wrap money in it, is not forbidden. So you see that you need both. You need designating it and using it. Labai Damar Hazmana Milsahi. The bias says preparing is matters, it's real. Azmi, you designate for use for tefillin, avagav lo tzarbe, even if you never used it for tefillin, it's still forbidden. Tzarbe, if you wrap the tefillin in it, azmini in, if you designate it as permanently used for that, then it's forbidden. Lo azmi, if you do not designate it for the tefillin, lo, that is not forbidden. All that matters is did you prepare it or not. Using it has no bearing at all. First, you need to designate it and use it. And Abai says, no, you need to, all that matters is designating it. Okay, still some time. Tashma comes to another proof. Nefesh, this is some kind of monument on a grave that was built for the sake of a living person. Mutter b'na, you're allowed to benefit from it. However, hosi bodimos echad, but you added on another road to it. Shem makes for the sake of a dead person. Also, but not forbidden to have benefit from it. So you see, designated is enough. So hachlam ayaskinin, this is what we're talking about. Mama be mace, that you buried a dead person in this grave, and then you add it onto the monument, then it is forbidden. So say, if so, Hosif, why you say it's only forbidden if you add it on? If you didn't add on anything, also Nami, it's also forbidden. The actual structure itself is forbidden. So no, you need it, even though you removed it. So if you remove it, so anytime it was there already before you bury the person, and then you take it away, no longer forbidden. It's only forbidden while it's there. If you add it on another row after the person's buried there, that row was built for the sake of the dead person. That row is permanently forbidden, and you cannot have benefit from that spot.
But the rest of the structure is not forbidden?
Right. If you take the dead person out, the rest of the dead person is not forbidden. Yeah.
The person stays there.
Then it's forbidden. Yeah. So Amar Rav and Papa Amar Rav Chisda. If you recognize the top row, Cholzo Moto, then you can take that top row off, and the rest of the structure is permitted if you take that person out. So Tashma, let's see another proof. Hachotzev kever la'avi, someone who digs a grave for his father. He went and buried him somewhere else, another grave. Is that look, if you can never use that spot. So no hasmishim kavod avi. That's because it's special honor to the father. It's not because he was designated. It's designated for his father. It's logical that that's because of his father. I say at the end of this state, at the end of this brisa, Rabbi Shimon says, even if someone who quarries stones for his father, and still you bury them, someone else did not use the stones as part of the burial. Right, so look, he can never use these stones as part of his own grave. If you say hey, it's fine if you'd say Mishum Kavod Aviv, it's honor for the father, and that's it. Sure, but then everything makes sense. If you say just because it's prepared, if someone spins thread in order to weave it into a garment for the dead person, does anyone say that's forbidden? Everyone agrees that's too far removed. Even though Bai says if you weave the garments for the dead person, then it's forbidden. But if you spin them to weave, that's for sure not forbidden. Let's just do one more proof. Tashma, let's see a proof. Kever Chadesh, a new grave, Mutulan Bana, you let the benefit from it. Hirtu Bonefel, put a miscarried baby in it, Asar Bahana. It's forbidden to have benefit from it. Or it says Hitil, if you put it in, yes, then it's forbidden. Loitil, but if you do not put a baby in it, no, then it's not forbidden. But it says, no, who did in the law be the same that's forbidden? Even if you didn't put the baby in. But Fuki Midar Rabban Shimon Ben Gamliel, to exclude the opinion of Rabbi Shimon that says that the babies don't have created grave, so that's why that's why he mentioned putting baby in makes it permanently forbidden because the baby's there. Because baby does have a halakha status of a dead person when they're buried. Okay, the next one's a little bit longer, so why don't we stop here? Tomorrow's not really much shorter. Hopefully we'll catch up a little bit tomorrow. I think we caught up a drop. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We were 12 lines up before. We're 12 lines up now, but one of the lines is shorter. So 13 lines. Yeah, we're a little caught up a little bit. Wow. Half a line. Okay. Have a good morning.